All right, everybody. There's obviously been some new developments in the Brian Kelly case, which case is weird to say, but that is where we're at this point. Brian Kelly has brought a lawsuit forward. Come on here, make an update after the first video, where I think a lot of this stuff is actually playing out kind of like I said it might. I think the reaction overall has been really negative, which I can understand in a sense optically right now. I think it looks bad, but I think when it's all said and done, we're going to come out of this okay and potentially for the better. But it doesn't help when you have national media people just so far off their rocker with their head in their ass, having no idea what's actually going on. I'm talking to you, Bomani Jones. I think you get all your information maybe from Tiger droppings right here, because all he's come out and said is first, sidebar, he said, "Oh, I think LSU's gonna hire Coach Obak. I think that'd be a smart move." Man, tell me you know nothing about how LSU works at all. Are you serious right now, Coach O? We're gonna rehire him. He said that, and then he said in regards to the refiring thing with Brian Kelly and Scott Woodward not having the authority, that he's basically saying LSU's arguing that Brian Kelly should have been showing up for work and should have coached the last game, which is obviously not true at all. If you looked into this for 30 seconds, you would realize how stupid that fucking sounds. I don't know. That shit pisses me off. But getting to the meat and potatoes of this, a lot of this is so overcomplicated. There's a lot of legal jargon. Now that the dust has settled a little bit since the initial news drop, I've watched, every big LSU's person live stream and stuff like that talking about it. And I think at the end of the day, we've gotten some more clarity because of this lawsuit and what happened in the days and weeks following Brian Kelly's firing. And I just kind of want to lay out the timeline and tell you what I think is going to happen, based on what I've heard from other people say that have much more legal understanding than me and you. So, first of all, we'll just do this in chronological order. Brian Kelly gets fired from LSU. A few days after the firing, LSU comes to Brian Kelly offering him a lump sum of $25 million for a reduced buyout and one go. He rejects it. A few days later, I think, or maybe within a week, they move it to $30 million, which he then rejects. And then it seems like went a little bit radio silent from that point. And then sometime in the last week and a half, Brian Kelly's representation wanted LSU to submit a letter by this past Monday, which that would have been the 10th. They wanted a letter by the 10th saying that LSU would agree to pay out the entirety of the buyout, which they agreed to in the contract. Obviously, Monday came and passed. LSU did not do that, and they actually informed Brian Kelly and his representation that they were arguing essentially that Scott Woodward didn't have full authority to fire Brian Kelly, and then he acted potentially solo. And now they're going to refire him, but this time with cause, depending on what of the 14 points in his contract that could potentially mean. And then obviously Brian Kelly and his legal team have brought this lawsuit forward against LSU. With everything that's been happening between Governor Landry and just the optics of this whole situation we seem to have gotten ourselves in, I think everyone has just been like, "Oh my God, this makes us look terrible. This looks like a shit show." And in a vacuum, I would agree. If this is all that comes of it and they're going to do this whole legal process, then this is really bad and does look really bad. But listening to some other people talk about it, I don't think that's going to happen. And I essentially can just play both sides of why I think this will get settled in the next month or two. On Brian Kelly's side, it was reported when he got fired by Yahoo and Ross Dellinger that he told people around him he does want to coach next year on a major program. Now, with this lawsuit, it makes it even more messy, just not even from like a PR perspective, but this could potentially drag out for, a year plus. And then, it gets to a point where if this does go to discovery and LSU is going to try to argue for cause, a lot of dirt's going to get spilled. That could potentially, or not potentially, it will hurt his chances of getting another job. Between that, the legal fees they're going to rack up from this, dragging on and on and on, because, he's not going up against some Jerry Schmidt. Like LSU's got a lot of money and, legal power behind it as well. So at the very least, it's going to be a huge pain in his ass. So if he wants to get another job and he wants to keep his reputation intact, it's probably in his best interest to come to some sort of settlement here. Then on the other hand, he could just want to argue that he wants his full money. He doesn't care how he's going to get it. The odds that LSU's going to be able to fire him for cause seem like very, very little. It sounds like there's no precedent for this whatsoever. The argument itself that they could refire him, I actually think has some legs, because if you read the bylaws of the LSU, Board of Supervisors or whatever, they do have the utmost authority above the AD. So on a technicality, they could say that Scott Woodward didn't have the backing of Board of Supervisors to make that decision. But we all kind of know what the deal is here. And that's why I think from LSU's perspective, it's just going to be hard to prove in a court of law, one, that he did violate one of these clauses in his contract, breaking the law, the vague morality clause, NCAA violations, because I think like NCAA violations, I don't think Brian Kelly broke the law, but in terms of NCAA violations, that's what I would guess if they really are trying to argue this fully that they get at. But with what we found out, how hands-free and care little Brian Kelly was with the LSU job for all the years that he's been here, I have a hard time believing that them bringing forth NCAA violations wouldn't also expose, some things other people did, whether that be coaches at LSU or administrators, especially with what happened with like that Title IX lawsuit a few years ago where there was some stuff being covered up allegedly that would paint LSU in a very bad light and could potentially get us in more trouble. And the optics of that would be terrible. So, like I said, how one of the reasons Brian Kelly probably is going to want to settle this is because he wants a new job. This dirty laundry being aired is not going to make him look good. It's not going to help his chances. You think Michigan State or UCLA or potentially if Cincinnati opens, they're going to be looking at Brian Kelly as a candidate. And it'd be pretty easy to cross him off based on all the shit going over his head, all these rumors coming out about how terrible of a coach he was, maybe how bad of a guy he was. But on the same thing for LSU, when LSU is trying to beg and plead with people that, hey, we are aligned, even though it seems like they're trying their hardest to show that they're not. That is their goal right now. And they're in this very short window between now and when a coach can be hired. Potentially, it could be as little as in a few weeks at the end of the season after the OU game, or sometime in the January if you want to go like the Kiffin route. It's going to look bad if they have this lawsuit hanging over their head as well. And the way other coaches are probably going to look at it is, hey, you did agree to pay this money when you signed that contract with Brian Kelly, and now you're doing this whole nasty legal fight to get out of it, to pay him less. It's not going to be a good look. The top candidates, guys like Lane Kiffin, Nick Saban, wink, wink. So I think LSU has a lot to lose in this situation. And that's why I have a hard time believing that this doesn't get settled for the start of 2026. Just because for either side, like to go forward, Brian Kelly getting a new coaching job, LSU getting a new coach, this doesn't do them any good on either side to fight this out. It's just going to make us look terrible on LSU side. And Brian Kelly, I think he's going to want to protect his reputation a little bit, even if he doesn't necessarily wants to coach again. So if I had to guess what happens or what is happening is that LSU played a card where, hey, now we're going to refire you with clause Brian Kelly. And then Brian Kelly and his representation are, all right, like proven in court. So it's kind of holding both of their asses to the fire, this lawsuit, and it speeds things up, I think, because both sides have something in the game with this just getting done. It's already gotten nasty enough. We don't need to make it worse. I mean, going to Discovery now, it would be freaking cinema if this goes to Discovery, the shit that would come out, I'm sure. I mean, get your popcorn ready, but I just don't understand what either side has to gain. Now, on LSU side, you think, oh, playing the card of firing for cause is fucking stupid. Maybe. But at the end of this, if they settle for the last offer is 30, if you can settle this for 35, I think more realistically something around 40 or $43 million for his buyout. And you can turn around and say, hey, Lane Kiffin or whatever coach I'm negotiating with, yeah, on the outside, it looks like we don't have our shit together and that was kind of bad. But hey, we just got you 10 million plus extra dollars for your roster that you're now free to pay with. If they can shave like 10 plus million off of this buyout, I don't care what happens. I think it'll be a good thing for LSU. But that's kind of where we stand. My prediction, the next 4 weeks that this gets settled, I'll just say for like $40 million. I think that'd be a reasonable jump. Maybe shaving off 10 million and just getting 40 million right now, it starts to make sense for him. But I also could be completely fucking wrong, and LSU is just going to make an ass out of themselves again, and we're going to be absolutely screwed. But I'm going to choose not to be a fucking chicken little. I hope you don't either. And I want to talk about the coaching candidates tomorrow because there's some smoke popping up at other schools about who their main candidate is. And some of them, it helps, cross some names off in terms of LSU search. So interesting times in Baton Rouge. The sky is not falling. I think at the end of the day, we'll look back in a couple months from now and be like, this was worth it. So till next time.